welcome back. And today I have two study buddies with me. And they're gonna read with me.
Oh, in the next video.
Can't fit you guys both. Hold on, everybody. Technical difficulties. Okay, I got the technical difficulties. I got them both set. All right. So we're gonna read Mr. Popper's Chapter 8 of Mr. Popper's Penguins. I accidentally just closed the page. Shake that Luffy. Penguins pomade. Mr. Popper soon found that it was not so easy to take a pigeon for a stroll. Captain Cook did not care at first for the idea of being put on a leash. However, Mr. Popper was firm. He tied one end of the clothesline to the penguin's fat throat and the other to its own wrist. "Work," said Captain Cook instantly. Still, he was very responsible sort of bird. And when he saw that processing did him no good, he rediscovered his camaraderie, decided to let Mr. Popper lead him. Mr. Popper put on his best study daring and opened the front door with Captain Cook wisely graduating beside him. "Gow," said the penguin, stopping at the edge of the porch and looked down at the steps. Mr. Popper gave him plenty of clotheslines leash. Mr. Popper, "Gork! Cork!" said Captain Cook, and raising his flippers and leaned forward bravely to the toboggan down the steps on his smooch. Mr. Popper followed the same way. Captain Cook quickly got up on his feet again and started to the street ahead of Mr. Popper. With many quick turns of his head and pleased comments on the new scene down Proudfoot Avenue, the neighbor Poppers called Hannah with her arms full of groceries. She had started on a shipment when she saw Captain Cook and Mr. Popper looking like a larger penguin himself in his black tailcoat. Heavens have mercy on us," she exclaimed. As the bird began to unsqueeze the strip socks under her house dress. Guys, you guys have to see this picture. Doesn't he look like a penguin? His black coat, his black hair, his black hat, black hair. Technically black hat too. His little tail. His feet his white legs, his white legs, his white tummy, his white tummy. His face. I think he's trying to be a penguin. That's crazy. He looks like exactly like it. Well, not exactly. The Laffy Taffy. We have 6 more pages, guys. It isn't an owl, and it isn't a goose. It isn't an owl, it isn't a goose, it isn't, said Mr. Popper, trembling his study dearly. It's Arctic penguin. It's an Arctic penguin, said Mrs. Claflin. Get away from me. Get away from me, said Mrs. Claflin to Captain Cook. And after tea it is. And energy it is. Not entity, explained Mr. Popper. Arctic. It was sent to me from the South Pole. Take your South Pole goose away from me at once, said Mrs. Claflin. Mr. Popper pulled oddly at Mr. Popper pulled oddly at the clothesline while Captain Cook took peering peck at Mrs. Claflin's stripped socks. Heavenly praise us. Heavenly praise us. Heavenly precede us, said Mrs. Claflin. I must stop at sea. I must stop at sea, said Mrs. Poppers at once. I would never have believed it. I will be going now. I would have never believed it. I will be going now. So will I. I would never believe it. I will be going now. So will I, said Mr. Popper as Captain Cook dragged him off down the street. Next stop was a drugstore at the corner of the Power Avenue and Main Street. Here Captain Cook, inside looking over the window, displaying what consisted of the several opening packets of shiny Wilbur crystals. These he had easily mistook the polar snow, for she being a peck at the window variously. Suddenly a car wheeled to the nearby crib with a shriek I would speak. And 2 young men spread out to the other. It's them all right, said It's them all right. It's them all right, said the second young man. The cameraman set up his surfboard on the sidewalk. By this time, the too smart crowd had gathered around, and 2 men in white cloths coats had even come out the drugstore and watched. Captain Cook, however, was still too much interested in the window exhibits to the brother to turn around. "You're Mr. Popper from 432 Proudfoot Avenue, aren't you?" asked the second young man, pulling a notebook out of his pocket. "Yes," said Mr. Popper, realizing that his picture was about to be taken for the newspaper. The two young men had been a matter of fact heard about the strange bird from the policeman and had been on their way to the Popper's house to get an interview when they saw Captain Cook. The police turned around and see the pretty Bridley and the photographer. "That's no police," said the other.
Someone looks like they're getting bored. Looks like you better read more excited.
"That's no policeman," said the other, who was a reporter. "Policeman? Police? No, it's not policeman." "Pelicans have a pork in their bills. I think it was too doo-doo. It was a doo-doo. Only doo-doos are exciting. This will make an elephant an excellent picture. If you would ever get her to turn around." "It's a penguin," said Mr. Popper proudly. "Its name is Captain Cook." "Gork," said the penguin, turning around. Now that they were talking about him, saying the camera, they walked over and exclaimed it. It probably thinks it's a three-long stork, and it's the photographer, his young bird of yours," said the reporter. "It is a he or she. The public will want to know." Mr. Popper insisted. "Well, I call it Captain Cook. That means it's a he," said the reporter, writing Rap ID in his notebook. Still curious, Captain Cook started to walk around the triple, still clothesline. The penguin Mr. Popper had stood. We were all tangled up. At the evidence of one black bystander, the triangle was finally straightened out by Mr. Popper's walking around the strip 3 times the opposite direction. At least Captain Cook standing still because Mr. Popper constant to pose. Mr. Popper straightened his tie and the cameraman snapped the picture. Captain Cook shut his eyes, and the way the picture appeared later in all the newspapers. "One last question," said the reporter. "Where did you get your strange pet from Animal Day, the South Pole Explorer?" "He sent himself for a present." Yeah, said the reporter. Anyway, it's a good story. The two young men jumped into their car. Mr. Popper and Captain Cook continued their walk with a quiet crowd following and asking questions. The crowd was getting so thick that in order to escape, Mr. Popper led Captain Cook into a barber shop. The man who kept the barber shop had, up to this time, been a very good friend of Mr. Popper's. Hope you guys like the story. See you on my next one. Bye, guys.